My name is Kirsty Dixon, and I'm the Planning Director for Brunswick County. So on behalf of Brunswick County and the Brunswick County Board of Commissioners, I want to welcome you here tonight. Thank you for coming out. We are excited that you're here, and we're excited to get your input for the future for Brunswick County. Your commissioner for District 3 is Commissioner Pat Sykes, and she unfortunately could not be here. She just had surgery and could not be here, but she has forwarded a statement to read. And again, she is very apologetic she could not be here. Good afternoon. I would like to thank each of you for attending and providing your input to the Brunswick County Blueprint for the future of Brunswick County. I would like to thank Kirsty Dixon and Aaron Perkins, who is the Parks and Rec Director, for all the time spent in getting this project completed. Also thanks to McGill and Associates for overseeing this project. As your District 3 Commissioner, I would like to apologize for not being able to attend this meeting in person due to surgery, but I look forward to reading the results. As you leave today, please encourage your friends and family to participate in the survey. Thanks again for coming out today. Pat Sykes, Brunswick County Commissioner, District 3. So again, on behalf of Brunswick County, we are very happy that you're here. There is a survey online. We're encouraging you to fill it out and get your friends, family, and teammates to fill it out. Anybody that you know, your neighbors, to fill it out so we can have as much input as possible to move Brunswick County to the future that everybody in Brunswick County wants. I'm going to turn this meeting over to the consultants. McGill and Associates is the lead, and Neelan Planning have partnered to make this happen. Thank you.
Thank you, Kirsty, and want to welcome everyone again. Obviously, we're very appreciative for the opportunity to assist the county in this effort. Michael Norton with McGill, Jim Ford with McGill, and Meg Neelan with Neelan Planning. Excited to be here, and if you haven't heard enough already about the intent of involvement, please take that to heart and encourage others. We know we're limited in our public settings, obviously for convening in larger groups, but Kirsty and Aaron have really striven to make sure that word is getting out in ways to contribute. You will hear a lot of those ways this evening, and please be ambassadors for the project, for your community, for your friends and neighbors in your community, so that we can ensure that this process goes well, because it is because of the data input that we receive that we are able to then digest and coordinate our efforts to create valuable summaries of information for your county leadership to consider and realize what we have heard in this process. And it's important also to recognize that this is a comprehensive land use plan as well as a Parks and Recreation master plan update simultaneously and by intent, because there is a lot of connection, as you well know, in the communities and the way the land is developed, as well as with the recreational capacities that are afforded us. So thanks again for being here. I'm going to turn things over to Meg, and we're going to begin the presentation session, which is in part some of the data, some of the information that is readily available both by the county and its GIS website and other means. Some of that data we've retrieved up to this point, but more importantly, recognize that your contribution to this type of data is very important.
Michael. All right, thank you so much for being here this evening. Under these circumstances, this is a big turnout, so we appreciate you being here. I'm Meg Neelan, and we're going to take you through a brief presentation that, as Michael said, we're just touching on some of the data that we've uncovered so far. And so this, in combination with what we're hearing through the process from folks like yourselves and other sources, will help us really get our arms around our snapshot of today. So this presentation will give you an overview of the process so you can get a sense of how it's going to unfold and where you have opportunities to participate. A little bit about Brunswick today, both the people and the place, and then saving time for discussion at the end so we can hear some of your thoughts and ideas and concerns that should be an important piece of the input that goes into this planning effort. So a little bit about the planning process. We have meetings and milestones along the way, but it's important to note that there really is two projects in one. And so being able to have this opportunity to look at both the land use and the Parks and Recreation system at the same time is really great, because that lets the Parks and Recreation system be an important component of your overall development pattern and a real framework element. So both the relationship between the two, there is that attention to the system as part of the development pattern. And so when these two are developed together, the two plans should work in concert to help you realize that vision for the future. The process is 4 phases. We're well into the second phase, and we expect the process to wrap up about this time next year. And as we move from the analysis stage that we're in today, and at this point in 2020, we'll move into the beginning of next year, where we'll get to shape the plans both for the land use overall for the county looking 20 years out, and the Parks and Recreation system. And so those vision plans will be complemented by a set of recommendations to help put the county on the path towards making that a reality. The latter part of the spring and into summer, we will be developing the plans that capture all these ideas, the vision and the recommendations, and that actually comes in several forms to appeal to the wide variety of audiences we're trying to reach with these plans. There is the survey that Jim will explain in a bit, but you see that note on the bottom. That'll stay open until the beginning of January unless we have reason to extend that. And I'm going to stop for 1 second and ask if there's a chance we can turn the lights off up front at the front of the room. That might actually help with visibility of the slides. Thank you. Sure. Some of the milestones along the way, I mentioned the inventory and analysis that we're in right now. This feeds into the formulation of goals, which are really important because while it helps shape the plan, these are the kinds of statements that there may be circumstances that come up in the next 20 years that the plans don't specifically address, but the goals still provide those guideposts so county leaders can make decisions consistent with the community's expectations. The vision plans and the recommendations I mentioned, but an important piece of the recommendations section is an action plan, because that list of recommendations can be fairly lengthy, and when we can pull from that some near-term action items that can be the immediate focus of implementation when the plans are adopted, that's the purpose of those. And then, of course, the final documents I've already mentioned. We have a multifaceted community engagement process that Jim will explain.
Thanks, Meg. Jim Ford with McGill. As Meg mentioned, it's a multifaceted community engagement process. We all know the importance right now of trying to find other ways to get outreach with COVID. So thanks for being patient, being here and dealing with that. Keep in mind there's a lot of other opportunities to voice your opinions, your concerns. If you haven't already been to the website, that's a super important resource for you. Mainly because there's multiple ways that you can leave us information. You can contact either Kirsty or Aaron. Their contact information you'll find on the website. But more importantly, that contact us, that's for if you leave here, you've already taken the survey. I've had over 800 people take it already. Let's say there's something else you want to add. Click there. It's open-ended. Leave me a message. Say anything you want, whether it's about land planning or recreation. We really do appreciate it. The flyer, some of you may have seen the flyer. That's got the meeting dates and times, as well as the web address information and just basic information. If you want to share with your neighbors, if you want to email to somebody, I'd appreciate it. The more people that hear about this, the better, right? There is a section here for maps. That section's going to grow. These maps we have now are kind of what you see out in the area behind you, but we will be adding maps. We're at the beginning of this study. We're just now fact-finding. And as we get things put together, we'll share those in those maps. The process timeline, Meg just went over that with you. I think that's important just to help you get a grasp of, we're at the beginning of this process and it does continue on. It's got those milestones. The project presentation, similar to what you're seeing tonight. If you guys have a group, a coffee house group, a church group, family or friends, and you want them to see that presentation, you could visit that portion of the website and be able to replay that. So we feel like it's important for y'all to have an opportunity to champion these ideas out in the community. And of course, like we've all mentioned, that survey, okay? It's important that you take the survey, that you let your neighbors and friends know, and any way you can forward that address. I've even got cards up front with the QR code. You can take some of those with you and pass those out. Like I said before, we've had over 800 people. I think last night it was 811 have taken the survey, and we're starting to gather information. This is just one example. We're talking about just identifying opportunities. Traffic and roads and green is coming out as one of the top issues people are talking about in the survey, and I've certainly heard that in some of the focus group meetings. This may change over time, keep in mind, but we monitor it regularly to continue that snapshot of what people are saying. So it's very important. Go ahead.
So a little bit about Brunswick today, that snapshot of where we are so we know what our starting point is. We are looking at the entire county, 1,300 square miles roughly, and 19 municipalities within this county is actually a very high number. So that in combination with this vast geography, we've got a lot of ground to cover, literally. So we've got 5 municipalities that are participating. They're listed here on the slide behind me. And the 5 that you see highlighted in the darker purple are participating because they're due for a land use plan or so on. So some of the other communities have a fresh, brand new land use plan, or they're doing their own planning exercise. So while they are included, they're not participating at that same level. But it's interesting to us to look at this large geography and see that really only about roughly 10% of your area is truly developed. There's a large area devoted to undeveloped in this classification of land, but it does encompass a lot of your agriculture, which I would consider a form of development. So, but anyway, a lot of land to be looking at, and over 80% of it is in agriculture. We'll talk about that a little bit more in a few minutes. Your population existing and what's coming, it's a pretty quick increase. So in the last 20 years, you've had a 94% increase in population, and you still have a lot of growth that's headed this way. It's like Brunswick County's been more than discovered. And so, we think about the numbers that are growing here. It's not just your full-time population. You have your seasonal population that increases the overall population that the county is serving throughout the course of the year. And that season's really getting longer as people figure out that they can work remotely and learn remotely. And so the choice to come to Brunswick and stay for longer periods of time is actually more feasible now than ever before. So you're probably seeing that jump in real estate in this area, and certainly seeing many more people around outside of the typical season. The age of your population is aging. So when you look at that median age and how much higher it is than North Carolina or the US in general, we're aging as a population in the US, but here those numbers are a lot higher. So that starts to point to some of the needs for county services and other things that are going on here in the near term. And so that's a high percentage over the age of 50 here. So we have to think about that aging community and what it means to be able to stay in Brunswick County over the long term. The population, of course, no surprise, it's concentrated out towards the beaches and in the Leland, Belleville area with that orientation towards Wilmington. So those areas are not surprising. And so a little bit about the place. This is a map we put together to get a sense of where development could possibly go, and it's just a starting point. And we call it a development status map to see where is that development. What you see in red is development or parcels that are developed and not likely to redevelop because of the level of investment on those parcels. I hope you can make out the colors well enough. There's a very large area in gray that's considered undeveloped. The green space is also open space, but it's protected in some way. It might be federal lands, it might be conservation easements, it might be parks and so on. So those are already protected. The areas in purple, if you can distinguish those from the gray, are what we call underdeveloped. And when we look at the parcel information, we see that there's probably an opportunity to redevelop or reuse those parcels because they are underutilized. And so when we think about the land supply, where development could go, those parcels are part of the consideration because we think that through redevelopment you can take advantage of some of the existing infrastructure capacity and so on. So, so they are not off the table. Your land use pattern from the tax data is really described in terms of 8 different types of land use areas that you see displayed here. Some of the things that you would expect is your corridors do have a lot of the commercial development. It's located there for the visibility, and a lot of the residential is in and around those spots as well as the beaches. But you still see how much of the land area is really devoted to undeveloped or agriculture and open space. So it's interesting when you take those land areas and look at it in terms of percentage of the overall land area. So 71% is considered undeveloped in this tax data, and only 17% is single-family residential, 2% commercial. When you look at the next slide and see how much of your tax base is made up of these uses or what's generated by these uses, 76% from that residential development that is actually only 17% of your land area. The commercial development, while only 2% of your land area, generates 7% of your tax base. So you probably still have quite a bit of room there to have a more balanced tax base with the introduction of more non-residential uses that could generate more of that. The values are in the same places where the population is, so where the people want to be is where the values are a lot higher. So we always like to look at that to see that difference across the geography and where those concentrations are. And when you look at home values specifically, a couple years ago, the chart that you're seeing on the left is one that shows home values increasing through 2018 to about 200,000. And in the last 2 years, a recent study was just done to look at where home prices are now. And so now we're over 300 with the median and close to 400 with the average. So they are going up, and it's numbers like the properties at the right on the beach that are in the millions that are bringing those numbers up. Your housing units, not surprisingly, given the scale and character of the overall county, most of your housing units are single-family detached units. And we think as your population changes and evolves, those preferences based on lifestyle and so on, there may be demand for different types of housing units, especially to accommodate an aging population. So we may see more diversity here, but that's where most of your housing units are. A lot of people are renting here. So when you look at the housing stock, the percentage that's devoted to renter-occupied units is pretty high. And those folks are paying a lot. Over 50% are spending more than 30% of their income on just their housing expenses, and that's a high number. The other thing we found interesting was the percent that's considered unoccupied, not somebody's primary residence and not being used for full-time residence. So that indicates a strong market still that you have for second home and vacation homes. So I know that's not surprising, but that's a big number when you compare it to other counties. You're in the top 5. That equates to a lot of tourism spending. So with that visitor level that you've seen with the population, as well as how much you're getting in rentals, you see a lot of spending on dining, entertainment, lodging, things of that nature. But we've also discovered that with, we'll talk a little bit about employment and people leaving the county, but you're getting some retail leakage, because when people leave the county to go to work every day, they're doing a lot of those shopping trips outside of the county, or their shopping needs are being met by other shopping outside of Brunswick County. So you've got the towns like here in Southport, and you've got the neighborhood and more commercial, neighborhood serving commercial and around the county, but there's 330 million that's leaving the county at least every day. Every year. So that certainly points to an opportunity here. Your jobs, because of the tourism industry, a lot concentrated in retail and food and accommodations. And that's not where the wages are. However, you still have a fairly high median household income, surpassing the state, in fact. And so a lot of that is coming with the retirees locating here with disposable income. So it is higher than the state, but overall your wages with the jobs are not as high as you'd like them to be. So here's some of those numbers about the commuting in and out of the county. You've got almost 25,000 people leaving the county every day for jobs elsewhere. You've got about 18,000 jobs here that people who live here in the county actually hold those positions. And you've got another almost 13,000 coming into the county every day for some of those jobs. And so that doesn't surprise us, because we know that some of these employers are locating in other locations. People are choosing Brunswick County for the quality of life. And because of the affordability or lack thereof, some folks who work here are having to drive in because of the housing costs. You do have a lot of large employers that are listed here. These are your top 10, and kind of gives you a sense of where they fall in those ranges. But that's not all of your employment picture. We've heard from a lot of folks, and we see it in the data, that a lot of your employment is with small businesses, the mom and pops, which is important for your tourism industry as well. So, and that's part of who Brunswick County is. And so we don't want to diminish the value of these small businesses that exist throughout the county. And how can we, with this land use plan, support those economic development efforts to retain those jobs and even grow those businesses. Your job growth through 2026 is expected to be a lot in the healthcare industry, and the good news about that is the wages are higher, but that's not surprising because with an aging population, the demand for those types of positions should be here, and so filling them is another thing. The construction industry is another big area of growth because of all that's happening with the real estate here. Education, you have high levels here at 28.6 of folks over the age of 25. That's the percentage of folks that have a bachelor's degree or higher, and we think that'll keep going up. We have to commend Brunswick Community College and the county for those efforts for what they're doing with the Brunswick Guarantee to help educate folks who are residents of Brunswick County that have certain a GPA or higher. The trick to that is with the programs that are being offered, the certifications, things like that align with what the employers who are here would like to see and the employers that the county is trying to recruit. That's very strong. So the key is being able to keep those graduates here in Brunswick County and employed in the county when they come out of those programs. But between the programs and the incubator and everything, that partnership with the college is really strong in advancing that job growth in Brunswick County. Agriculture is a big piece of your economic picture still.
It is. It's a major part of Brunswick County's identity. With 80% of the county being agriculture, you think, gosh, keep in mind a large portion of that is timberland. So while we do also have row crops and produce, a lot of what you see is timber, it's trees. So looking at 254 farms averaging 179 acres, you kind of get a feel for what you're seeing as you drive along throughout the county. This is just a graphic to kind of give you an idea of what that looks like. Consider all these areas we know to be so forested. That's your agriculture. Those are your agricultural areas. With agriculture, though, there's a great opportunity. You know, right now I'm sure all of us have heard about eating whole foods and eating local. We have an opportunity in this county to take advantage of that, we believe, and be a healthier population. And when we talk about health, we also talk about needing to get out and move more, which is another place where our land plan and our recreation plan come together. This is just an inventory map. What I've started doing is looking at not just what the county offers, but also what do the municipalities offer, what's available in the private areas. Recreation takes many forms, and what you don't want to do is say you need something that perhaps is being offered in another way. So we're looking at that. Go ahead. One of the things that I do is I try to capture also how close you are, or what are the service areas of the particular facilities. So with the county facilities, we have a lot of these district and community parks, these large parks that you would, there would be the park that's closest to you, right? But not necessarily one that you would drive across the county to get. So service area is one of those areas that we look at. But how well accessible facilities are, go ahead. It also matters for walking. Not everybody wants to drive to the park, and honestly, if we want daily activity, we really need to be within walking distance. So I'm also looking at using some tools available online. This is ParkServe, you can look that up. But I've taken Leland, Navassa, and Belleville recently and just started to look at, well, where is the population density? Where are the walkable routes? And does that population, do they live within 10 minutes of a park? Those areas in red, they don't, right? And if you live in one of these orange areas, maybe you're closer. But that's what we're doing. We're at the very beginning process of trying to get a picture of what recreation in the county looks like and how accessible is it to everybody.
And you would have recognized in one of Meg's earlier slides the environmental areas, some of those areas that are set aside, either in conservation, preservation. This expands a little bit on that mapping and shows some more uses of that nature, whether it be wildlife, animal habitat. We also see CAMA setbacks noted on the header there on the legend. We know we have rivers, we have the waterway, we have the ocean, and we have those protected areas along our water bodies, and rightly so. So we have federal and state regulations protecting certain areas around the county. We also have flood areas. So these areas begin to impact and shape what is usable as far as development types, inclusive of the land development side and the park planning side. Equally important, you've heard mentioned infrastructure, and Jim noted one of the survey elements in transportation. Transportation obviously is a key component of infrastructure, as would our water, our sewer, our broadband coverage, which has become very important, obviously, since March of this year throughout Brunswick County. A lot of efforts in that area as well. So as we have a good backbone of systems in some of our major corridors, the county also recognizes and has plans and projects in place currently, as does DOT, as do other infrastructure facilities. So we want to make sure to capture what is taking place in those areas to support infrastructure as well.
So you can see there's a lot of data that we're pulling together to look at a lot of things and start to make sense out of what's happening in Brunswick County today. And what you see in front of you right now is a glimpse into a preliminary analysis to see what's suitable for different types of uses. So when you think about where development is, where these environmental constraints are or assets, where the infrastructure is and so on, it starts to, those are the factors that when you're thinking about where would a residential developer be looking, where would industrial or commercial developers be looking. So it kind of mimics how they would sort out these areas and decide. So as we start to answer together those questions of what kind of development should go in this county and where, this helps look at it in the same way that real estate professionals look at it. And so the one on the far left is residential, where you see the green and the yellow. Residential wants to be in a lot of places in Brunswick County. When you look in the center, that's commercial. You're seeing a lot of red and orange, and that's because commercial wants to be in those corridors where they have the visibility, so and close to the population centers. The industrial is a little bit more forgiving in that they will seek sites that are a little further off of those major corridors as long as the infrastructure is there, and they want to be further away from where the residential population is. So that just kind of gives you a sense of how we start to look at the land, and so we can begin to answer those questions of where is it naturally going to gravitate, and then given your ideas about the future of Brunswick County, where should we be directing that change and that growth. And so, so with that, we'd love to begin a discussion or simply answer your questions that you might have about this whole process, or ideas or concerns you have for the future of Brunswick County over the next 20 years. And all of us are happy to take any questions that you might have as well. But I think at this point, we'd love to hear from you about what concerns you the most. What are the kinds of things that when you think 20 years out, what should we know as this plan comes together? What are your expectations? And really anything that comes to mind for you. So, yes, and I'm going to, by the way, I'm going to repeat the questions, so I might have to have you repeat them if they're long. So go ahead.
I have a loud mouth. I'm curious of what's going to happen to the blighted existing strip shopping centers that look terrible. They're empty. Developers clearly don't want to rehab, refurbish. So what does the county do when that happens? Because I live in River Mist, and you go right out on 211. I live in a really beautiful neighborhood, and you pull out, there's a car wash, there's a mattress place, and then there's nothing on the corner, that major corner where there used to be a restaurant. And I thought for sure that would be snapped up, and something nice would go in, and people all put plans in. Oh, what's going to be there? What's going to be there? And a year or two goes by, and nothing. So I'm just curious. What's the big scheme? What's the big plan for those empty buildings that just sit here and collect dust?
Yeah, that's a good question. So every community is in a stage of evolution, right? So not everything's going to be brand new and shiny and perfectly located throughout. So when something new and shiny comes along, some of those tenants jump from the old centers and go to the new centers and leave some of those behind. One of the things that is true about our urbanizing areas, especially those that go quickly, is that they're built in such a way that they do have a lifespan. It's not like the historic center of Southport or some of these others that have that enduring quality that lasts for hundreds of years, right? They're very different places. And so the market has to catch up with that. And so when you saw that map at the beginning, the development status in those purple parcels, some of those fall into those purple parcels because it's exactly that they no longer have that value and they're ripe for redevelopment. So when we go through this process, I don't have an answer for you at this moment or yet, but part of our job through this process is to talk about those areas where redevelopment could happen and what are those uses that should be accommodated. But those are actually really great sites because they already have the infrastructure, right? And they're close to the population.
They're right there.
Yeah. And so, so we'll take a look at those areas and see where most of that is. And it may be a completely different use. It may be that the commercial uses are not what it needs to be, and it can be completely transformed into something entirely different. But that's a question that we expected during this process and hope to have some answers as we go along. What that is where you guys come in.
Thank you for answering. And the other question is, do they have any control over, now we're going to have 4 car washes within a 2-mile radius? Do you have some control when somebody says, I want that site and I want to put a car wash right here where nobody wants it? What happens then?
A little bit. I mean, a lot of that's market driven, and so anticipation of what constitutes a good, strong center and not overdoing. Some of that can come through the policies, but you also recognize that some amount of that is just market. Some businesses want to be near. It's like when you see a Burger King near McDonald's and a Hardee's shows up and Wendy's shows up.
Right.
They all know they're targeting virtually the same consumer, right? And so when one doesn't work out for the consumer and they can go right across the street to the competition, that's why you see those multiple businesses.
But if we're not careful, we're going to have $1 zillion general stores here. You know, it's happened in a lot of other counties.
Good question. Any other questions?
Oh, come on.
Okay. Right here.
Are there any plans to take a look at the Southport, Oak Island, this whole area ordinance and increase the park availability there perhaps with a pool? I know there's a large amount of people in this area that, although it's great that the college has the pool, 35 minutes away, and if there's a large group of people that really would like to have that option because it's perfect for the demographic that you even mentioned, swimming and water aerobics and everything like that. And I think it would just be something that there's probably a lot of people that are very good at that.
Right, so I'm going to simplify your question just to say, are we looking at this area to understand what the needs are for parks and recreation, pools and so on in this area? And the short answer is yes, that we will be looking at the whole county. So our inventory, and Jim, you may want to explain this in more detail, but the inventory that we go through to see what facilities are on the ground today, what's being met in terms of demand. And part of, a fast-growing county, part of what you're experiencing is the population is showing up and shifting around. And so what was the demand 10 years ago was very different. Do you want to?
Right, so
I
when
think
we
you
have
actually have to come to
facilities,
the microphone.
so when we have facilities across the county, maybe they don't reflect the needs or desires of the population anymore. So while we're also looking at what we have and where it's located, we need to hear from you. So the way I find out that, hey, this particular portion of the county really wants activity X or program Y is through that survey and through meetings like this. So we're in the fact-finding mode now. So I'm glad you brought that up. Make sure everybody that you know that would like that type of amenity responds.
20 years ago, they tried for a pool, or YMCA. We're still trying, apparently.
Maybe so. We just got started and we're glad to hear.
You sound like go-getters. That's a good sign.
I know Southport has its own county land use plan, and so we weren't in that list. But and that is our long-range planning document, and the first 2 priorities identified as our vision and core values is preserve our historic character and protect our shoreline vistas. That's the first 2 of our vision and goals. And I would kind of like to know, one of the things about Southport, and this is how they would watch, but one of the things about Southport is that we are challenged as a community because we're less than 4 square miles, but we act as the urban hub for the county, or a large portion around us. So we only have this less than 4 square miles of individuals paying taxes for the infrastructure, for the facilities, for the services, but yet we're utilized And as you can see, the 211 corridor is this huge, massive thing that's beating down on us. And so I'm also a county taxpayer. So my question is, what is the county going to do? Southport will fail long-term if we don't figure some other thing. We can't provide this little group. It'll either become so unaffordable that middle class won't be here, and will become a beach rental community, or we're going to have a larger plan. It's going to have to include Southport. Recently, the county would not reinstate our sewer district, so the only carrot we had in a situation in North Carolina's voluntary annexation, the only carrot we had. So essentially, our ETJ, which is the mile around us, will be competing to deliver sewer to them with the county, which we won't be able to compete with. So I'd like to see Southport receive some sort of focus from the county of how, for our citizens. I'm living in Southport. But when we look future and we think future, it's got to be Brunswick County's got to be a participant in this solution.
So you bring up a few interesting points. One about your plan calling for the conservation of your historic areas and your viewscape off the coast is, I'm sure, just one of many within that plan. And you also talked about Southport being that hub and also, needing that support from the county to remain viable and functioning over the long term. And one of the things so to your first point, one of the things that we like to underscore, and you may have seen it in the process diagram we were showing, is that this effort is as much about conservation as it is about managing the change that's coming and directing that growth, because there are so many wonderful assets, natural and cultural here, that when you think about that, Southport's a great example, that you really need to be mindful of that. So the development pattern needs to acknowledge those things that you want to protect over the long term. So it should be a future land use and conservation map. The other thing about it is, whether it's Southport or one of the other municipalities or the county, it's so important to remember that all of these plans ideally would work in concert. And so part of our charge is to look at the plans of the municipalities, including the ones who are not participating, because we are looking at the whole county, and to take that into consideration. And then this county plan will be formed mindful of what's in those plans, and where you have alignment are your best opportunities for partnership. And what I would say about any of these municipalities or the county, and this is true across the Carolinas, is that no one local government can really handle everything that they need to do to be able to achieve that future that they desire. And so when you create these plans and they become those communication tools, you can find those areas of commonality, and it starts to reveal places where resources can be shared, or some of those efforts can be combined so that you can, what you can't do alone, you can do in partnership. So as we look at these plans and hear from the county as a whole what that future scenario might be 20 years from now, we will happily point out those places where, wow, if the county partnered with Southport on this, that would really move both entities' goals forward. So we think that's a possibility. Private sector included too. It's not just the public sector that will implement these plans. So when you see the recommendations, some of them will call for specific actions that really rely on the private sector's participation. So you're all in it together. So it's a really important point. Can be daunting when you look at that and think that it's all on the shoulders of the town to implement. So as much as you can treat each other as partners, you'll get further down the path on your individual plans.
The Southport County Land Use Plan is getting updated in December, so y'all are working with the most up-to-date.
Great, okay, great.
I would like to point out that we, or McGill Associates and Meg is going to be doing an interview with every town to get copies of their plan, see what their visions are. So that is taking place.
Right. So yeah, Kirsty was saying we were actually talking to representatives of each of the municipalities, and in fact, folks with the sort of the rural crossroad unincorporated communities too, to kind of get a sense of that. But in doing so, we are gathering those plans to be looking at them.
And just on that idea, we in Southport, we have over 7 acres over on 9th Street across from the elementary school, and that the city has in the past identified that for a future athletic complex. There have been discussions with the Brunswick County Board of Education about possible partnership project maybe or something, but that's just been sort of ethereal. But it is an opportunity. You know, Southport's a destination and so we provide all these services, so it would be really great if we could have a partnership with the county and develop that. Also, if the county would help, I know connectivity, because I know Christie's been big on connectivity projects, and if we could have within Southport some help to create more connectivity, because so many people come here just to walk the waterfront, just to do the this and that are coming from outside of the city every day, that live outside of the city. And, you know, that's a lot of energy and a lot of vitality, and it's an awesome thing, but it could be so much more. It's just that we have such a finite pool of money that it would be, if we could access more and have more connectivity within our own infrastructure, our own parks. We have several parks, like they're getting ready to do a new park for us. So, but if we had the ability to connect that, then we could accommodate more of these people and not have them be so centered in one spot trying to park in the same place.
Right.
So this is really sort of a la all Brunswick County conversation. But if Southport could get some of these partnerships with the county.
Yes, so partnerships with parks, connectivity, all those kinds of things that actually make for a better experience, right?
Walking paths, bike paths, whatever we can create. And if we're an older population, we're supposed to be moving. We're supposed to keep moving.
So that's true. So a point about the connectivity, we're hearing from a lot of the groups that we're speaking with, and we expect to hear more of it, is the importance and desire for more walking trails, hiking trails, even blueways, but those linear connections. And what are those points they're connecting? It's certainly the towns, but it's also some of these parks and other destinations, and it makes for a much more meaningful reason to connect when you know that there are sort of these points along the way that it's not just a recreational purpose, it's a transportation purpose as well. Thanks, Shelley.
One more point on the pools.
Mm-hmm.
Looking at the aging population, senior fitness in the water is the #1 thing now, as you all know. So there's only one indoor pool year-round in St. James, and it's a private community. So I wanted to touch on, we just don't want a pool just for, I think it would be a wonderful opportunity for seniors to have a place to work out that's safe. And also, for children living here, especially underprivileged kids, when I traveled to Australia a couple of years ago, I was so impressed that they brought kids down to the beach. It was part of their curriculum. Because they lived at the beach, it was a safety issue. They taught every child how to swim. We have a lot of kids here that, you know, they get in the beach, they get in the water. You can tell their parents don't know anything. They let the kid go off. And, you know, we've got riptides. I don't need to tell you all how. So I'm thinking from a safety standpoint and for our aging population, that's 2 more things you can put in the plus column for a pool. And now be quiet. Thank you.
That's good. So pools for seniors and pools for children to learn and to exercise. So and those are right. And I think we even have some open-ended parts of the survey to make some specific comments about ideas like that. But one of the things that we heard from one group, at least one group today, was the idea that yes, you have an aging population and recreation needs to be responsive to the needs of the seniors. And so part of what you're getting at too is the idea of 20 years from now, as the population grows and changes, there are other age groups that need to be supported. So thank you for bringing that up, because there are other, I mean, it's part of what people would consider the quality of life here as well. And so thinking about all generations, but there will probably be short-term needs and then long-term needs. So I think those are 2 good options to identify. Yes, ma'am.
I was a teacher back in Maryland, and speaking on the point that she just made about teaching children to swim, part of the 4th grade phys ed curriculum years ago was 2 weeks of swim lessons for every 4th grade child. And they did that for years until it became too expensive to run the buses and to pay for the various different pools. But it was a wonderful program. And I think it's really important. Every child should know how to swim.
Right, so every child knowing how to swim, and that's a huge safety issue in any county, but when you live at the water, there's a greater risk of incidents if you don't have that. And so probably most of us grew up in areas where you had swimming lessons available to you, so it was something we sort of just expected. But that's a very important point. It's not just because it's fun, but because it really is a safety measure. Yes, ma'am.
Well, you also have benefit for teams. You can have swim teams. You can have, competition. You can have athletics. You could incorporate a swim team at the high school where they may not have that opportunity before. So, there's a lot of benefits, especially, at all age groups. All age groups.
Right. So what you're getting at is the programming side of things, which is also part of the Parks and Recreation Master Plan. It's not just the facilities, but also the program offerings. And a lot of times when we think about Parks and Recreation programs, our heads go straight to softball, baseball, soccer, and things like that. But you're right, swimming is often a part of that picture as well for the range of offerings. So those are the kinds of things that we hope will also come through the survey. Is it in the back? It's you.
I want to know, how in-depth are you folks going to be looking at the housing needs in Brunswick County of our population? I was delighted you mentioned the finding that over 50% of our renters are cost burden, paying more than 30%. Are you going to be looking even more deeply at that? Because to me, that has great implications for the kinds of housing that we need to be building beyond just single-family dwellings where people who can afford to come here. So the whole idea of workforce housing is one that I'm hoping you're going to be looking into very carefully.
Well, so the way we do that is we look at the available data, and so you've got a glimpse into some of that about the housing, what your housing stock looks like, and what your rates are, and things like that. But we've heard loud and clear from just about every group we've spoken with so far that the need for workforce housing is extremely important. And where that shows up is when you think about folks who work here and have to commute in every day, and then we see these percentages of income devoted to housing, and that's troublesome. So in the context of the land use plan, we're looking at ways to find those places where other types of housing can be introduced, because it's in that you can start to provide the workforce housing. And also, who's living in them, what are the access to services and things like that. And so we usually start by thinking not just workforce housing, but just generally how people's lifestyles and stage of life changes what their housing preferences are. And so at the very least, we'll be getting at the housing variety and looking at, from a market standpoint, what you can and should expect here in the future and how to diversify that so that you really can appeal to the folks that want to work here, live here and work here, and also for the folks who are aging out of their single-family homes, what their choices are within the community, and so on.
And I would add to that, a group that can't really speak for itself very well, those people who are on fixed incomes with disabilities and people who will need some type of subsidized housing, transitional housing. We have people in our community, and I'll be sharing some data later on about those populations, because I don't think people who don't have good housing, they're not likely to go online and fill out a survey. So I just want to be sure they are included in what we think about the needs of Brunswick County.
Yes, being able to get to folks who have different housing needs that would not ordinarily participate in this process. If you can help us connect with them, that would be terrific. So we need to hear from all folks, and it goes for any group really. If you know they need to be heard in this process and they're not likely to go online, Aaron and Kirsty would really be happy to find out from you those connections to those groups. Any other questions or thoughts, ideas? Yes, sir.
You had put up a screen showing the average age in Brunswick County, and I noticed it was like, low 52, I think it was, or somewhere in that. Curious, how does that compare to 5-10 years ago? Are we seeing that number rise, or are we seeing it? I might have missed that.
Right, so I don't have that data in this presentation, but just looking at those age groups over the last couple of decades, I would have to go back and look at that, but I'm guessing that with the retiree population, increasing so much here. I bet that's increasing. Plus the folks who decided to locate here 10, 20 years ago are still here for the most part. So it's those folks that are aging. So there might have been, that bubble might have been just a little bit lower 10, 20 years ago.
Because I'm in real estate, and what I see is this push that's happening from New Hanover County into Brunswick County as the housing market in New Hanover County just continues to rise to where people can't afford it. Young families are moving this side of the creek.
Right.
So I thought I saw the horse breathing, so I'm going to read it a little bit harder here about the pool. My son is a Boy Scout, which so by default I'm a leader. And we have to do swim tests every year for summer camps, for high adventure camps like Sea Base down in Florida. And what we find is that we're at the kind of the mercy of the Brunswick County pool, that also is in mentoring some of these males and females now, since they've merged, is really getting past that fear of the water and helping them, because without the ability to swim, they cannot get their Eagle Scout, period. It doesn't work. So we have to work with those kids quite a bit. It's very hard to do because the parents don't know how to swim. They don't take the kids to water. And it's a shame when you see them working so hard on 99.9% that this 1/10% is going to potentially hold them back. So with that said, I'll say more in the survey.
Okay, no, that's great. So those comments, so you bring up the scouting as having that need for those types of things. When we talked to some folks today, and actually yesterday too, there was some conversation around how do we attract younger families. And so some of the conversation went towards amenities and things to do, what they would like to do. But you're hitting on some things. Education was another one that was brought up. And so when you think about attracting young families here, it is all those things, like how can they have a regular childhood and participate in all these things that they could participate in other communities. And so when we asked folks what would it take to bring young families here, outside of the jobs that would bring their parents here, you know, it is the schools, it is these kinds of programs, things to do, but it's even the neighborhoods, you know, with so many retirees occupying a lot of the neighborhoods where they live, do they have children their own age to play with? So these are questions that are popping up in all of our conversations of what does that future of Brunswick look like so that regular American families can live here and their children can have a childhood with access to these kinds of things, and hopefully choose Brunswick County as the place to live and grow up and work. Yes?
I read somewhere that in Brunswick County, 1 out of 5 children is hungry or is, what do they call it? It doesn't have, solid food choices. And I thought that was just appalling. But then you look at, a lot of folks here live here and have 2 homes. So we go from the wealthy to the really disadvantaged. And you've got them both in the same county, and it's the chasm is getting bigger and bigger if we don't start doing something.
And that disparity in the counties, especially around our urbanized areas, is greater than most people would expect. I'm going to do a quick time check. I think because we may have another session starting soon. So is that clock anywhere near 2 minutes? Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap up, but I want to make sure that everybody has this web address. We sure hope that you will stay tuned into this process through this portal and other meetings to the extent that we can schedule them throughout the process. But please, please, please share this link with your circles and the survey link within it so that you'll do that. But on behalf of our whole team and staff, we want to thank you so much for coming out tonight. It's a really important step in the process, and we're really happy to see you here and have you participating. So thank you so much.
Thank you.